This is my collection of bottles, and today's video I thought I'd just do a little bit of a discussion about preserving your food. G'day folks, Andy here from McDowell Manor. I started thinking about making the video, I sat down and did a little list of different ways that I know I preserve, and I thought, I might talk about a few of these and what the pros and cons are of each, because in my humble opinion there is in fact no right way to preserve. It's just all horses for courses. So that black thing there, that's my smoker. So it happens to be a gas upright smoker. It's quite a large volume smoker, so it's kind of pretty handy. I've noticed the only time I really use it is when I'm smoking sausages. I find smoking, now this is only my opinion, smoking by itself, I don't put nitrites and nitrates and stuff in my sausages. So I don't see it as a great way to rely just on the smoke. You know, I'd still freeze those sausages after they were smoked or keep them in the refrigerator until I eat them. There are cold smokers which are offset, so they have a little box on the side over here, say, that the smoke goes in and the smoke comes up and goes through into there, so it actually comes in quite cool. Mine's not one of those. The wood for mine goes in the bottom down there. So this works a bit like a little oven at the same time. You can run it at a fairly low temperature, or you can run it much faster. Just put them all back together again for storage. Mine gets used mostly for cooking and imparting that lovely smoky flavour that you can't otherwise really get, more than preserving. Now we all have refrigerators pretty much these days. Clearly it gets used for things like extending the life so I can get a reasonable batch of tomatoes, through to eggs. They happen to be quail eggs. I'll come back to the refrigerator because that's also got my jams and chutneys. Fridge, or even a good ice box that we've all come to love and know, will get you a couple of weeks worth of food preservation time. That's enough for most people's needs. The trouble with a lot of fridges too is that they rely on power. Now I'll come back to the power discussion when we talk about the freezer. Method number 3 is fermenting. Now this is not my sauerkraut. This is a bought one. I happen to see it cheap, so I bought it. But you'll see I do have videos on my channel. The long-term viewers will know. I've done sauerkraut. I do kimchi, which is a Korean version of fairly much a sauerkraut, a lot more spiced up. Now those ones you tend to use the naturally occurring lactobacterias. I'd also include converting milk to cheese. I've got a lot of cheese making clips you'll know as well. Pickling, I count that as a ferment really. I've done golden quail eggs pickled, beautiful. Pickling's a good one because it is pretty easy. You've got a few simple steps to follow. So long as you make sure that the top's not exposed to the air, so you weigh it down under the fluid, it works a treat, and you're then talking about months rather than days or weeks, which is really useful. Forget both beer and spirits. Both those commence originally with a ferment. One you're fermenting sugar using distiller's yeast, and the other one you're fermenting either grains like barley or malt. Method number 4 is drying. Now it's equally as easy. You can see I use no electricity or anything else when I dry. I dry my Madagascar beans, and I have quite a lot of those. You can see I'm drying chilies there. Madagascars are just stored dried. They'll last for years in a container stored in the pantry. So I tend to grind that up into a powder. I use a little tiny electric spice grinder or coffee grinder. That works a treat, and that lasts a very long time as well. That's ginger on the left, turmeric on the right. Long-term viewers will have seen, certainly will have seen me drying and powdering the turmeric. You can do similar things with ginger. I don't do that, but either of those so much anymore, because I tend to just sort of dig out what I want when I want it and use it fresh. And I let it store in the ground. It seems to work all right in the ground as stores for ages. With drying, you could also include dehydrating. You can do that either in the oven, or they make little electric dehydrators. I've used a dehydrator to store things like eggplants. You just dry them right out and do the same thing. Put them in a container and they'll store for ages as well. One is the good old-fashioned freeze things. You can see any considerable leftovers. Mostly I will freeze them. You can't really tell, but in the top there's a lot of homemade bread that we store frozen as well. You can argue freezing is a good one because you get months out of that. But I'll come back to why I'm not so enamoured with the freezer anymore. Number 7 is making jams and chutneys and what we used to call preserves. I water bath can those, so I put them in a big pot. Boil them for 20 minutes or more, and that way you know the lid's going to go back down, and they'll store for 12 months as well. These ones are kumquat marmalade, August 19 they were made, and that's what all these empty bottles are for. I actually recycle a lot of bottles, so I can use them for that. Now I'll give you a quick look in the fridge because there's a few in there to see, but it is a good idea to label what they are. That's mango chutney. Now I know that will have been made in December because that's when I get the mangoes. There's another one of those August kumquat marmalades. This is a chili sauce from September last year. That's another thing I do with my spare chilies and tomatoes. The trick, of course, with jams is and preserves, they need to be highly acidic. If they're not, so let's imagine it's meat or something, or even beans, you can run the risk of botulism, which is not good. The boiling water doesn't get hot enough to kill botulism. The other thing is, once you open a jar, of course, it goes in the fridge. When it comes to meat, rather than just freeze it, I like to vacuum seal it as well. That protects it from freezer burn, and also helps extend the life even more. So that's what it comes out like. That's quail. You can see it's been sealed at the top, but that's the little machine. You can pick them up fairly cheap from most big department stores nowadays. That one cost me about 30 bucks, I think. So that's another good way. Now, given that I have a freezer and I obviously use it to preserve all sorts of leftovers, the quails, leftover bread, that's juice made to ice cubes for us to store easy from fruit we grow around the place. I think that's what that is, but I can't quite bloody tell. So freezing's great. So why am I not so enamoured with it? There's two reasons. As you saw from my freezer, you just plain run out of room. But also, what's led me down the line towards this pressure canner, which you've probably heard me raving about the last couple of videos. In 2004, let me tell you this little story. In 2014, we had a big flood here. Now, we also had one in 2011, but that one didn't cause me so much trouble. In 2014, we lost power for 2 weeks. So everything that was in my freezer, first of all, I went for a couple of days, I just didn't open it. But eventually it became clear that even that wasn't going to cut the mustard. So I spent about bloody 3 days solid cooking everything I could get my hands on that was in the freezer, to realise that most of it wasn't going to store without refrigeration anyway. So I was in considerable trouble with food stocks and lost a whole lot of stuff, which has led me down the line to the canning. Now, I wouldn't can everything and throw my freezer away or anything stupid like that. I'm not saying canning's the be-all and end-all, but I am saying that you can can things that are A, non-acidic, which is a sort of step better than just the jams. You cook them, it actually cooks it while it's canning it. So you cook it at the same time and it stores as whole meals. And of course the other beauty, that lets me store, these are 1 litre or 1 quart bottles, full of cooked baked beans. So if worst comes to worst, I've actually got 2. They vacuum seal, obviously, in the canner. You can take the ring off once you've done that. So that puts me in a position where I can in fact store a whole lot of meals that are pre-cooked. So the next time I get 2 weeks without, not only am I preserving things like a whole lot of beans that I don't want to waste anyway, but that also puts me in a position where next time I lose power, I've got gas barbecues and stuff. I could certainly easily heat these little meals, pre-prepared meals up. So I'm in fact going to store all my quail and other stuff like that done as quail cacciatore and all sorts of excitement things. And I'll store them in the cupboard. And next time we have a flood, I'll be right, mate. So anyway, if you like this kind of homesteading videos and things, feel free to hit the subscribe button. I do try to mix up the content. I realised while I'd showed jam recipes and stuff that I hadn't actually talked over all about preserving, so that's the point of this video, is to rectify that. Alcohol preserves really well, folks. Those boxes are beer, they're beer. Homemade, everything's homemade. Well, that's a lie, not everything. Anyway, if you like to hit the subscribe button, and if you hit the bell button, you'll even get an email to tell you when I put the next one up. Right, you have a good one, eh? Stay safe. Uru.